your story and some of the things that we talked about last time.
Yes.
And, you just you just gave me something else that I want to ask you about.
Oh, cool.
When the time comes. Pat, tell us when we're ready. Okay, so begin by by saying your name and where we are right now.
Okay. My name is Solomon Isekeije. We are at Norfolk State University, and this is what will become a maker space in maybe the next 2-3 months. And it becomes that space where students can come in here with their dreams. And at the end of the day, we turn those dreams into reality. So that's where we are.
Well, speaking of dreams, begin by telling me a little bit about your life growing up. What kind of place did you live in? What was the community like? How did you experience it? Those kinds of things.
Well, I can't quite remember when I was born, but I remember as a young child, maybe 5, 6, growing up in the police barracks, as we would call it, kind of like the military base. My father was in the Nigerian police. My mother was a elementary school teacher for a couple of years, and when she started having children, she decided to stay home and just kind of take care of us. And something that I'm always very, very grateful for, because I think I needed more taken care of than my brothers. I was always very, very slim. I just call it skinny, very skinny. And so my parents were consigned. And I was consigned for a while because I wasn't one of those children who would eat a lot. I just wanted to be in my space, just think and draw and stuff like that. So we had consigns. But growing up in the barracks, you know, many other families from different parts of Nigeria, you get to experience the diversity of the country. And I grew up recognizing that. My mother was a part of a women's group. And what I remember about the group is that once a month or thereabout, or during festival occasions, about 50 women, all dressed in similar attires, would literally march down or walk around the barracks and just sing. And before you know it, a crowd will follow them. And of course, they're usually children, you know, and I was one of those children who would just kind of follow them, you know, and just watch this woman just serenade, you know, the neighborhood. I didn't understand what they were doing or what that meant, but I enjoyed just seeing them, you know, sing. So I always have been very conscious of, you know, the importance of a diverse community. I don't know I don't think I know the importance. I knew the importance then, but I was just conscious of it growing up. But then in the police force, the Nigerian police force is different. You have one police force that basically polices the entire nation. You know, here you have different cities have their own police departments. So no, we have just one police force. So you can be transferred, just like in the military, to any part of the country. And so we were moved around quite a lot from Lagos, Nigeria, where I was born and grew up for the most part, to the eastern part of the country, in Enugu, to be precise. Enugu is a different region, so that calls for a different language and a different culture. In fact, the physiognomy of the people, totally different. A lot of my friends who are Igbo are light-skinned, and some of them can have David's complexion. And so that kind of diversity, you know. But moving to the east means that we had to learn this new language. And so we did. We didn't stay in the east for too long, and then we were transferred to the northern part of Nigeria, to be precise, Sokoto, which is a part of Boko Haram country today, if you put it that way. It's very close to the desert. The culture is different. The people are different. But I fit in the northern part of the country because I was skinny and tall. And that's how you would traditionally define, based on physical structure, people from different parts of Nigeria.
And what was the ethnicity of your family within this diverse Nigeria?
That's interesting because my parents are from a very small kingdom called the Otuo, speaking people or kingdom. It's very close to the more popular Benin kingdom. The people from Otuo can understand and speak the language of everybody around them, but I don't think everybody else speaks our language. It is also quite interesting, which, and I haven't figured that out yet, but I'm just guessing that maybe one culture existed before the other, and, I don't know. There are a lot of things I don't know, but I just I'll figure them out at some point in life, So we are from Otuo, a small little kingdom, but we were not raised there. We were born in Lagos, which used to be the capital city of Nigeria, and grew up in Lagos. So I did not grow up speaking my native language first. I grew up speaking English and Yoruba, which is not my native tongue, and then eventually I think there was an executive decision in my house. My dad and mom might have sat down and realized that we're raising these kids and they will know absolutely nothing about our culture. So the executive decision was nobody gets to speak English or Yoruba in the house. Everybody has to communicate in Otuo language. That was not a lot of fun because there were so many things we couldn't say. I didn't have the right verbiage to articulate in our language, Otuo language. So when we speak with our parents, we always hop from one language to another. And that is true until today. I can start a conversation with my mom, and then I'll switch to English, to Yoruba, sometimes say certain things in Igbo. And there's other reasons you want to do this is this. In my language, when you speak with somebody who is older than you refer to the person in a plural term, not in a singular term, as a mark of respect. I still don't understand why other cultures, like our culture here in the United States, when you refer or make reference to a person's age, somehow it becomes, that's offensive. Growing older or becoming an elderly person in the community, it's something that we were brought up to hope for, and to hope that we will live long enough to have the wisdom of old age. So, and I still carry that with me, So when you're speaking to your parents, there are certain things we cannot say to our parents. Like I cannot make reference to my mom, in a singular term. So if I'm speaking English and I want to say you, like mom, you, I have to switch to another language to say that because it will sound disrespectful. So I exist in that flux,
So what do you think about the meaning of speaking to older people in the plural? What does that indicate?
Well, so in Yoruba, for example, you say, I want to say thank you. I would say eshe, and eshe is something you would say to, literally translated, you would say that when you're talking to 2, 3, or 4 people. I think literally what it might mean is that you respect that person enough to, I think you respect their wisdom, you respect their intellect, you respect the fact that they have somehow survived here on this earth as long as they have been here, that you want to put them in a place of respect. I think as we continue in this conversation, I might find the words to articulate that better. But right now, it's eluding me because Yoruba language especially believes in our physicality and a spiritual cosmos, and each individual has kind of like an alter ego that exists in this spiritual cosmos. And so sometimes I think when we refer to older senior citizens in a plural term, it's out of respect for how powerful their alter ego might be.
And this is kind of where I wanted to go.
Okay.
Because when we talked before, you talked about a cosmology
Mm-hmm.
that you absorbed
Mm-hmm.
when you were growing up. As
Yes.
part of your surroundings. And can you say a little bit about that?
Oh, so this is really interesting because when you really think about Yoruba religion and Yoruba, worldview, it is very, very similar to, the Greco-Roman, worldview. I believe in multiple deities, for example. If you think about ancient traditional Yoruba architecture and you compare that to early Greek architecture, they're very similar. A lot of very interesting similarities, right? But as it relates to the Yorubas, they believe that the Yorubas have over 401 different deities. And so as a young child growing up in Lagos who spoke English first, I was always fascinated by the possibility that there are all these deities. And of course, I wanted to know them all. I probably got as far as 20, and that was it, right? But I was always fascinated about what these deities might look like, what they do, and all that. So I was always studying about Yoruba religion and way of life. It's a very interesting cosmology because there's a belief in reincarnation, and there's a belief that if you treat your fellow humans well in this lifetime, your next come around or your next go around will be better. You might be elevated, kind of like the Buddhist, way of seeing the world. So Yoruba religion and Yoruba belief system, the most important rule is that you must treat people with respect. You must try to make everybody's day feel better, be better. So the Yorubas have a different salutation for every single time they would come across or see you during the course of one day. So there's morning, afternoon, and evening, right? But in between, a lot of things happen. If I saw you 2 hours ago and you were sitting down and just having coffee, and I would say, "Oh, good morning." If I'm coming back and you're still there, I would say, "Eku ijoko," which means, I hope your sitting is comfortable. And if I come back again and you're talking with, a friend, the salutation will be different. So there's a conscious effort to make sure that your fellow human being is having the best experience they can possibly have. And you're, in a way, partially responsible for making sure that happens. So if somebody's in a dire situation, you're not supposed to think about just walking by. I think to think that you could just walk right by will be considered a sin. You're supposed to react by doing whatever needs to be done first, and then you can think about it later. And that's something I find really, really interesting, in the Yoruba belief system, And they also have very interesting mythology, very interesting stories. They're, like we said, there's so many deities, and there's a deity responsible for everything. There's a deity responsible for warfare, if you're searching for maybe riches and wealth, there's a deity you want to appeal to. Fertility, gods and goddesses. So there's somebody is responsible for everything, right? So which means if you steal from someone, there's a deity we can appeal to who can get to the bottom of that, act. And the consequences sometimes are dire. So nobody really wants to be brought before, these gods, At least I grew up with that belief.
And I remember too that you grew up in a house with lots of books.
Yes,
A learned household. Can you talk about that?
My dad enjoyed literature, especially Shakespeare. So I think he would always share some of his stories and readings with us. For example, The Tempest. That was one of my first, story, and I didn't know that it was actually written. It was a book that was written by somebody else. I thought, he actually, made up that story, and he would talk about Ariel and talk about, all these wonderful, wonderful, narratives, and they began to form the bedrock of my artistic worldview, of my artistic interest. And I think they still define what I do till today.
You're very good at anticipating the next question.
Really?
Because the next one was going to be, when did you begin to realize that you were an artist?
I think I realized that since I became conscious. But it was not prudent, nor would it be smart. For me, when I was growing up in Nigeria in the 70s, to tell my parents that I wanted to study art, of all things. So I bided my time until when I was old enough and strong enough to absorb the repercussions of having to deliver that bad news to my parents, But surprisingly enough, when I eventually sat with my dad and said, I'm not interested in med school or in law or all those other things that a very good Nigerian child is supposed to want to aspire to become. I was quite shocked at his response, and his response was, well, as long as you can take care of yourself, we're fine with whatever you do, Yeah, but that's and that's a blessing, it's a blessing because I know countless other maybe young people did not have the same experience. They've gone through their lives doing things that they really did not want to do, but they did those things to please their parents, and that was not our case. So I'm thankful for that.
You also told me a story about going to the university.
University of Ife.
And about the appearance of this university.
Oh.
It's a great story.
So if someone were to walk into this room right now who attended University of Ife, so we would often greet each other by saying, "Great Ife." And the other person would just have to yell a little louder and say, "Great Ife," right? And that's how we greet each other. And I really do believe that University of Ife is one of the most amazing places on earth. So you drive to the gate, the main gate, and the main gate is about maybe 2 miles or 2.5 miles from the main campus. And so you only see 2 roads, one leading in and one leading out. And to your left and right is this really beautiful botanical forest. And we later found out that every single tree, every single living thing in that forest had a tag on it. And that was amazing to me, that somebody knows that these trees exist, right? But 2.5 miles straight, and you're driving or walking towards the campus. And as you approach the campus, it literally rises from the ground like a phoenix just emerging from the earth. That's exactly the way it was planned. I don't know who designed, that campus, but they did a fantastic job. And even if you can kind of go online and pull, images of the university, for a college that was built maybe in the 60s, it's a beautiful work of architecture. And the experience is also unparalleled. I have to be honest, a lot of the things that I've done in academia are modeled after some of the things that I learned and experienced at the University of Ife. The decision to attend the University of Ife is a totally different story. So Ife is believed to be the cradle of the Yoruba civilization. It's believed to be that spot on earth where mankind was either created or something, and there are sculptures and artifacts and sacred places in Ife where, amazing things like, the rod of Oduduwa, which is the first man, that's on Adam, and it's believed that he's supposed to be about 15 foot tall. So his rod, his staff of office is still somewhere in Ife, and you can visit it. And it's a huge, tall, oblique-like, object. So it has a lot of stories, mythology, and if this is the cradle of mankind, then I wanted to go to school there. And in so many ways, attending University of Ife really helped to sustain my quest and interest, in the arts.
Let me back up just a minute.
Okay.
And say, tell me about the name Solomon.
That. Yeah, I asked my father the same question once. I said, "So why Solomon?" Because as I'm getting older, in my teens, I'm realizing that boys will be boys and they will do stupid things occasionally, and I had to think about that. And I said, so if I do something really stupid, someone might articulate this to me and say, well, why did you do such a silly thing? And then your name is Solomon, and you're not supposed to do stupid things. Don't you know who Solomon is, right? I had that thought, so I had to ask my father. I said, well, why did you choose this name? Because this is a burden, And he smiled and said, well, around the time you were born, as is the custom in my part of Nigeria, children are named for the signs around the time they were born. So he said, around the time you were born, I made some decisions, and they turned out to be pretty, wise decisions. So I thought that we will call you Solomon. And I said to him, and now I have to live with that for the rest of my life. You could have chose another name, right? So that's, but I read a paper by one of my colleagues here, actually. I don't know if it was a published document, but I read in his own handwriting, he was writing something about identity. And he spoke about the burden of our names. In our culture, you are supposed to respond or act according to the qualities your name is supposed to exhume. So it's a burden to have to think before you act all the time, because you think somebody might say, wow, that Solomon that's a foolish Solomon over there, But I think I'm beginning to think otherwise, think about that whole name thing,
Well, since you mentioned identity, thinking about you growing up, and you were saying that you were living amongst Yoruba people,
The Yoruba
but
people.
you were not Yoruba, you were Ottawa?
Ottawa, yes, Benin. Yeah. Okay.
Give you a break.
Yeah, it gives me a break. Water break.
Yeah. But this is great. And I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk before, because
Yes.
I know what I want to ask you.
I love this chair. I get to.
Oh, yeah, it's one of my favorite chairs, too.
I know.
When I teach, I do the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
And the kids are like, oh, he's having too much fun.
Yeah, he can't be a professor. He's having way too much fun with us.
Yeah.
Are we good?
Just give me a second. I got the light. screen, and now we got the 100% battery.
Perfect.
So how did you think about who you were? Or was that even something you thought about?
I was conscious of the fact that, and this is something I had to live with, and I still live with it, every second. So you ask me a question, and I think about the question, and I don't think I always think about the questions in English, and I don't think I process the answer in English. I think I have to process the answer in one of many languages, and then decide, and translate that into English, and then decide how to, because of the subtlety of the need to be proper, respectful, and to make sure that one does not bruise other people's emotional, state of being. So it's always something that I believe personally I kind of I struggle with a little bit, to make sure that when you respond to a question, you respond appropriately, But in terms of identity, it's difficult to peg it down and say, this is what I think it is, or this is what my exact identity, might be. Because for me, it's in a state of constant, evolution and changing and flux and things like that, So for one who grew up speaking Yoruba and then learn how to speak Otuo and Igbo and a little Hausa and God knows what in between, you take something from each culture, each language. Each culture has a mannerism, that sometimes comes with the way the language or the phonetics are delivered. So you take something, and that something, it takes a while to fully assimilate what it is and figure out what aspect of it you really want to retain and what aspect you don't. So you might experience something 10 years ago, and 10 years later, you're still trying to work it out. But being an artist is something that helps me with that, because things I cannot work out completely, I try to work them out on my canvas, on my multimedia pieces, which is one of the reasons why I chose multimedia art as one of my medium of expressions. Because for me, going back to my Yoruba, exploits in the cosmology of the world, even inanimate objects have a spiritual essence. So when I introduce a material into a mixed media, work of art, it's not necessarily for aesthetics sometimes. It's not because it has a direct correlation with the composition. Sometimes it is just to pay homage to a spiritual essence or presence that that particular subject might relate to. So there is layers and layers of trying to figure out what my identity might be today and what it might be tomorrow. Culture, they say, and I share this with some of my students, and I say culture and nature are truly two of the most complex words in the English dictionary, because they're the two words that I think on a daily basis they're evolving, they're changing. The definition would change today and it would change tomorrow, And so for one whose work is heavily connected to cultural elements, I don't think I can fully define my identity. I think it's something that is in flux constantly.
How did you imagine, when you imagined your life as an artist, as a young man?
Yes.
You knew that this is who you were going to be. Did you think that you would be an artist in Nigeria, or did you think that you would leave? Yeah.
I'd never thought I would leave. I actually said I would never leave. I did not want to leave. I love Nigeria a lot. I love the people. I love the culture. I almost want to say I love the food, but I'm not a heavy, I'm not somebody who eats a lot, But I still enjoy seeing the food and the process of preparing the food and all the festivities that, surrounds the whole preparation process. I love all of that. I love the fact that you can drive in 2 hours in any direction, and you would be in a totally different kind of topographical, landscape with different culture, different people. I love that about Nigeria. But, we only have this one life to live. At least that's what we know. And I think we have a choice to decide how we want to live it. And I think those choices exist at different levels. So after college, I did not look for a job like everybody else, and this is part of being stubborn as well. I did not look for a job, but I decided that I wanted to kind of start a small company or start something that I can call my own. I wanted to build something from scratch. So I went into collecting artworks and selling artworks, which meant that I was not in the studio producing as much as I should, but I was able to represent 5 of my classmates at least, collect their works, sell their works, and we were doing well. Because nobody really determines or dictates the price of a work of art, so I can buy one for $200, and if I can sell it to the right person for $2,000, it's possible to do that, and that's pretty much what we did, But that experience quickly turned into something else when I realized that I could potentially be making a lot of money, and I was making some. But in terms of the meaning of my life and what I was doing with it and how it affected other people positively or negatively, I really couldn't say much about that. So I realized that I needed a graduate degree. And I wanted to go back to the University of Ife for my MFA. Well, and I remember having a conversation with a very good friend of mine. His name is Jim Callahan. He was... I can't remember his title, but he worked at the USIS, the United States Information Services, in Nigeria at that time. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he asked, so about grad school. And I said, yeah, I want to go back to grad school, but I'm going back to Ife. And he said, you should consider going to maybe Howard, in the United States. And I said, no. I'm sure Howard is a great institution, but it can never be like University of Ife. So I said, Jim, you have to understand what I'm saying. Ife is the place. And we joked back and forth, right? 2 years later, I've put in my application, and the university was closed down. Every time the government comes up with a policy that does not serve the people well, traditionally in Nigeria, the students are the ones that respond. They are kind of like the adults. They are the ones who have enough common sense to figure things out, and they are the ones who have the will to do something about it. So they would often go out and riot and protest and all that, right? And the government always responds in kind by shutting down the university. And that can be for a year or 2 years. So which means your life is suspended for 2 years, right? And that was the situation with me when I was getting ready to go back to grad school. And I realized that I can do this. So I decided to apply to a program here through a very good friend of mine. Then we're no longer very good friends now, who was visiting Nigeria and happened to be working with Dr. Bruce Onorakweya, whom I was studying under at that particular time. So it was just mere happenstance that he was in Nigeria, we were there together, and I would spend my lunch break studying when everybody else went out to lunch. I enjoyed that because Dr. Onorakweya had so many books, and so I would just go in and flip through the books and read the books. And so one afternoon, I guess he asked, why are you always here, when you should be out there? So we started talking. So that's how I ended up, here. I also didn't want to go to a university in a big city like Washington, D.C., or, because I grew up in Lagos. And I did not want another city. I wanted somewhere quiet. And And so when I heard about Old Dominion here in Norfolk, and I read a little bit about Norfolk, the Navy base, NATO, and all those wonderful things, I said, you know what, that's more like me, and it's been a wonderful experience.
So you came to ODU.
I came to ODU, the Masters of Humanities program, and I was going to complete the MA program in Humanities and then move on to other things. But I ended up not really finishing that program because I had a conversation with one of my professors, Ken Daly, who said, I guess he came into the studio, saw me in the studio, and he said, and this is how Ken would speak, and everybody is usually terrified of Ken until they realize that he's just a nice person, but so super knowledgeable. I think his intellect is what intimidates us all. And so he came in one morning and he said, Solomon, I think you should apply to the MFA program. And usually the answer will be yes, sir. And so I applied, and that changed everything.
So when was that? What year?
So to 1998, I came into the MA in Humanities program, and I think by 1999, I was in the MFA program.
How did you get from there to Norfolk State?
Well, the MFA program was a joint program between Old Dominion and Norfolk State. And I really had my studio at Old Dominion. You could take your courses from both institutions, and a lot of my courses were there and a few were here. So I had that relationship with Norfolk State when I came into the MFA program. I finished the program. Well, let me go back a little bit. So the MFA program for me as an international student, who was probably doing quite well in Nigeria, but coming over here, I realized that the cost of tuition, if I had to get money from Nigeria, we will have to sell the entire village to be able to pay maybe one semester's worth of tuition. So I had to come up with a plan B very quickly. And the plan B was to produce my works and try to sell my works. And that was how I paid tuition, and that's how I also made a living. Because I wasn't eligible to work. I was on a student visa. And I did not necessarily have a support system here, to help me, put me through college. Nor was I fortunate enough to receive any kind of scholarship to kind of, help me through. But the folks at Old Dominion were very, very nice and very kind. Not only did they figure out a way to find some kind of way to provide tuition waiver for me, they were very supportive in a really cool way. And I knew what they were doing. I'm not sure if they understood that I knew what they were doing, and I so appreciate it. Anytime somebody is having a party, a retirement, an event, one of the wonderful faculty members in the College of Arts and Letters will reach out to me and say, Solomon, this person is having a retirement party on next month. Can you make a piece for them? They were just trying to keep me afloat, I think, and so the good thing is a lot of my former professors and mentors now own a lot of my artworks as well. Yeah, so that was a cool part. So and I think for me that really made me question a lot of things, because you hear stories about people and about places, and you think you have them figured out, right? And here I am in this country, thousands of miles away from, family members, friends, and anything, right? And then I run into these people who kind of took care of me like, I was their own, right? And the stories that I heard was, oh no, they will be this way, and they will be that way, and they will be this way and that way, and that was not what I experienced. And so it reinforced the need to pay it forward, for me, so anyway, I'll tell you a little story, if you don't mind. So I was in college, undergraduate school, and like most of my friends, they would spend the summer outside the country. Their parents were rich. I wouldn't say my parents were rich. Okay, maybe a little. But so I wanted to go abroad. So I asked my dad, Dad, I'm planning to do this. I want to spend the summer abroad. And he looked at me and he said, son, I don't think that's a good idea for you. I said, but what do you mean? He said, because you're too stubborn. He said, if you go to the United States, I mean, this is the United States. People have guns. And if you go to the United States, you might piss somebody off, and then, you might get in an argument and they might shoot you. So, no, I don't think that's a good idea. But he got me on one ground. I was very stubborn. And some will really say I am still quite stubborn, but I think it's what it means to be an artist, what it means to have an individual mindset and to be able to follow and chart your course in order to make your dreams or visions come alive, But when he said that to me, I couldn't say much because I knew what he said, I was stubborn. But when I got here, that's not exactly what the story was. Nobody has pulled a gun on me yet, so, you learn, you live and learn, but I will never forget that that embrace. And most of these individuals I still stay in touch with. I still consider them very important, kind of members of my extended family. A very good friend of mine, his name is Clay. Clay would invite me to his parents' house in Virginia Beach, and his mom, has since passed, but and then we will have Sunday dinners there, right? And so I refer to Clay as my brother. He's white, and whenever he speaks to me, he's, hey, brother, right? And we really do mean this, and we have each other's back like that. I haven't seen Clay in a couple of years, but if something happens today, I would, I would step up for him, So again, when it comes to community, I think our definition of community has broadened. It's different compared to what I thought it was, at least coming here.
And you mentioned the fact that Clay is white.
Yeah, he is white.
So,
yeah.
What's been your experience of race living in Norfolk, Virginia?
It's very interesting. So I'll go ahead and confess now. One of the things about relating to the difficulties associated with race is that as a foreigner, I can act like I don't really know the nuances of a particular event or story and seize that opportunity to address difficult subjects. So most people would not relate to me the way they will relate to an average African American male. So which gives me the audacity to speak about, those so-called difficult subjects if something is going wrong. And most people would forgive me because they just say, well, he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know the difficulties and the nuances of this story. But I think it's important to talk about things. When you talk about things, you're able to air your feelings and people heal. So every time I have an opportunity to do that, I do that, because it heals me, it heals the other person, and it heals all of us. But my experience of race has been like a bag of, how do you say that? A bag of mixed.
Mixed bag.
A mixed bag?
Mixed bag.
A mixed bag. That's a good one. It's been that. A lot of it, though, I don't think are conscious. A lot of the negative experiences I've had and that I have sometimes on a daily basis are not conscious. I think people do things or say things sometimes that might have stereotypical implications without really knowing. Be it, people that I deal with on a daily basis, mock, me for the way I speak, or maybe not have enough patience to try to understand what I'm trying to articulate. When I'm actively trying to express that in a way that they would understand, but not having that patience to say, well, let me try to understand what he's saying. but it doesn't bother me so much. It does bother me a little bit sometimes, but it doesn't bother me so much because you cannot fault somebody, for being ignorant about something. You kind of have to give them the opportunity to understand what they're doing first, before you can fault them and say, well, you were wrong. I mean, it's like somebody who is unable to process things like me and you, somebody who might have, mental health issues, and they cannot rationalize things. You can prosecute that person and punish them because they don't know. You see, so that's how I kind of relate to those experiences when they happen. But they happen a lot more often than most people realize. And I'm aware of the fact that most people's, whenever they perpetuate these stereotypes, I don't think they are aware of what they're doing. Now, I think we will learn in maybe 10, 20, 50 years what these subtleties, these uncomfortable subtleties are. I'm not sure if the time is now. I think we're dealing with more obvious things like, the way this society has treated and is still treating people of other backgrounds, African Americans, a lot of minorities. So let's deal with that. Let's deal with that. And I think in time when we rise above that, we would now have the platform to address, other aspects and other areas and other experiences, especially as it relates to the experience of, people who came here from another place.
Another way of asking my question is, have you ever felt like you had to take on the burden of a history that's not your own?
Yes.
In this country?
Yeah, all the time, all the time. But I'm conscious of it. I'm always fascinated by how people react or how they treat other people. If they stereotype those people, and I'll give you a practical example. So occasionally I'm driving, and I was not smart enough to understand certain symbolism in the American culture. For a long time when I was at Hampton University, I drove a black SUV, a black Expedition, and I have logs. So I've been stopped quite a number of times, and then when the officer approached the vehicle, and they said, "Good afternoon," and I said, "Good afternoon, sir," and we start to converse. The initial reactions, because when you say good afternoon and, good afternoon, can I see your, you're looking at the expression, you're looking at the tone and everything. Can I see your driver's license and this? And then I gently, provide whatever they need and wait, and then suddenly, right, the tone changes. And suddenly they're a little more, caring, so, how are you doing today? So things, and I can only guess that those changes occur for a number of reasons. One, I guess once they receive your driver's license and they go into their car, they know who you are, right? And so they go in there, and I'm driving an SUV in a white T-shirt, and I have logs, and I don't understand the symbolism of all these things, right? And then when they go over there and they come back, everything changes, right? And it's like, oh, have a nice day, sir, be careful, that kind of thing, right? But the way I also react, I think also might have something to do with that. Like I said, my father was in the police force in Nigeria. I have a younger sister who is an army captain. I have an older brother who served in the Nigerian army. And those kind of relationship with law enforcement. So maybe I've been trained in a way to know how to speak to people in authority. But yes, I've been profiled, if I could put it that way. And it's not just at that level alone. it's happening, and it happens quite often, and I think at least once a month, and I've been not only a profile, but there's a level of profiling even in places like academia where you expect that it shouldn't happen, right? And I've taught for the most part at HBCUs, and this is a touchy subject, but it happens, and you just deal with it, and you just keep moving. You just keep moving, because I'm always concerned about what we all bring to the table. I think my experience as a Nigerian living here in the United States helps me see certain things differently. I think my upbringing and training also helps to inform the way I relate to my job. In the Yoruba culture, one of the first things you learn is work ethics. And the way they teach you that is by teaching you a song. Now, I'm not known for my ability to sing, but I'll sing at least one verse of that song, And it goes like this. It says, Batarea dun ko ka. Batarea dun ko ka ti o ba kawe re. Batarea dun ko ka. The literal translation is this. If you take your studies seriously, you get to wear good shoes. And your shoes will make good sounds. But if you don't, you get to wear a messed up shoe that will just drag along, and it doesn't make a good sound. But the same can be applied to how you relate to your job. We would even say things like, work does not kill anybody, but poverty does, right? So these lessons, in a way, have also become a burden, because my day in the office starts maybe at 9 in the morning, and they usually sometimes end at 11 p.m. at night sometimes. And that's not because somebody makes me stay here. It's just because I think I have one life, and I have a lot of things I must do in that one life. So I just have to do them, right? But I've also been fortunate that my family have been quite supportive, and they understand that if I have an idea in my head and I cannot take it out of there, that it would bother me. So they just kind of let me do, they give me the space to create my work, and sometimes I'm not always in the studio. Now that I also serve in an administrative capacity, I'm in the studio, I'm in the office, just doing whatever needs to get done, knowing fully well that tomorrow is going to be there and I can finish it tomorrow, but it just doesn't settle very well, But I think those are all from the upbringing in that culture,
Where do you find community? Do you find it in your neighborhood? Do you find it here at the HBCU at Norfolk State? Where is community for you?
Community for me is really among my colleagues, our students, and the neighborhood around the university. When I go home, I want it to be quiet, and I'm so fortunate we live in a really, really cool, neighborhood, and everybody is just amazing, So, but at home, I like quiet at home. But here at work, I have learned to integrate my teaching with my community. And my community is any community that is in close proximity to any university where I teach. That becomes my community. I have this belief that education should not take place within the four walls of a classroom anymore. That only a very small percentage of that should happen, that education should happen right in the community. If you're teaching a student about perspective, well, take them outside to the community and show them how to apply perspective right here on this street, right here. What it does is it creates an image the student will never forget. So a lot of what we do in this program, in the BA Fine Arts Graphic Design program at Norfolk State, and the MA and the MFA Visual Studies program, are linked to the community. And it has solved a recruitment problem for us, and it has also solved our retention problem. Because when you are able to encourage an undergraduate student to participate in a community mural project, and they create this wonderful mural, and they receive an email a couple of weeks into the semester saying, well, the secretary of HUD is visiting Norfolk, and they might be visiting that locality or that building where your mural is situated. Oh man, you have no idea what it does to a student, right? And they probably don't even know who the secretary of HUD is, but some important person is coming to see my work. Any student who goes through anything like that, traditionally, in my experience, you never really have to discuss retention issue with them anymore. Or we had a group of students, graduate students, who were at the Hermitage Museum. They were there initially to volunteer for the Burning Man exhibition, and we had the opportunity for each of the students to create a community interactive art project where members of the community were a part of the creative process. And it changes the way they perceive, the community. I've been in universities where it's an unknown fact that the students are told to stay on campus and avoid contact with their immediate community because it's not safe. And what I did there was to take my students into that same community and engage them with members of the community in ways that will help the students break this barrier, but also lead to economic growth for that small city. Everything is connected, I believe, but your community is the one you create for yourself. That's how I like to look at it,
So could this way of approaching art and teaching happen in the same way in Nigeria? Or is it unique to something that can be done here?
It's really interesting, because the educational system in Nigeria is modeled after the British educational system. But when you go back into the cultural, the diverse cultures in Nigeria and the Yoruba culture, for example, and you study the role of art, the kind of artworks we create for centuries, they are usually functional, kind of art objects and functional art experiences. We were doing performance arts before the word performance art was conceived, right? And part of that is the knowledge that art is not meant to be this experience that is reserved for the exclusive 5%, of any community. Art is something that is supposed to bring a community together. It's supposed to be the glue that binds, the people in a community together. So that's what I try to do, as an administrator, is to help my colleagues understand that every single assignment, an assignment that is not given within the context of an experience, a subject matter the student can relate to, is a waste of time, is a waste of the student's time. And this is the cool thing. The students would often vocalize this. They would say things like, why are we creating these color values? Why am I creating 10 boxes with 10 tints or shades of white? This is redundant. The students will say that. And for 40 plus years, we just make them do it. Well, we understand why, but they don't. But if you took that same student and you say, okay, now we're going to practice an exercise in, developing tints or shades. But let's go out somewhere and let's identify a business, let's identify a community or a problem that needs a resolution and create a piece of art based on that. but everything has to be in monotone, so you can have 10 shades. Now you've explained it to them in a term that they understand, and they will do it happily, and they will do it well, and they would engage in that project a whole lot, with a lot of interest, and it will be meaningful to them. In a place where we pay thousands of dollars for tuition, I think we owe it to our students to make sure that their experience, their educational experience, is our number one priority, not just the degree. The degree is good, but when they live here, they need to be able to say some of the things that I'm saying about the University of Ife today. And mind you, I say what I say about Ife, it doesn't mean that it's a perfect place. The housing was not, you can't even compare it to what we experience here. There's so many things that were not perfect, but the experience is one that I will never forget, regardless, So I think there's a lot to learn from what one's experience might be, maybe in West Africa, in Nigeria especially, and learning some things from that, and kind of figuring out a way to assimilate those into this culture, and also learning from the American, way of doing almost everything, and a synthesis of both creates something unique for me. It keeps my imagination active, and it just kind of keeps me excited and interested in what I do. Because for me, the moment if I lost interest, I would not be able to do it. I cannot do anything I'm not interested in. I don't have the ability to do that. To kind of like fake it, I can't do that,
Okay, well, you came here as a student.
Yes.
And you always thought that you would live in
Yes.
Nigeria, and you've been here a long time.
Yes.
And maybe we'll be here for a long time to come, maybe.
Yes, so this is my home now.
So, yeah, now that's what I wanted you to talk about.
It's my home now.
And what does this country and being in this country mean to you?
Well, it means everything, I have kids here, I have daughters. My daughters are growing up. Actually, one of them, just left the house and decided that what she wants to do is join the U.S. Navy. And for those who know me very well, they know that having a child in the Navy is probably one of those things that I probably never thought would ever happen, and probably worked hard to make sure that it didn't happen, right? But it happened. And if you raise a child, the first thing you learn is that you will do your best, and then once they're grown, you just have to support them in what they want to do. So I'm a military parent now, and that's quite interesting and exciting to me. So where else would I go? My own child, right, serves the U.S. Navy. I can't go anywhere else, because I live for my children. I live for, as we all are supposed to do. We get to that point where it's no longer about us, it's now about them, And by the way, and I love my culture, I love my family, I love everything about my country. But when you leave a place like Nigeria, about 2 years or a year and a half thereabout afterwards, you're no longer really considered Nigerian by Nigerians who live there. Because the notion is that your worldview has evolved. You now think like an American. So you don't understand what we're dealing with here. You've been away for too long. In essence, your Nigerian card has been revoked. So you cannot know. If I say something like, well, we're working on this project, how about we approach it from this point of view? They say, well, and my younger siblings will say, no, brother, you don't understand. You've been away for too long. Yeah, it does hurt sometimes, but they're convinced in their views that you do not understand and will probably never understand. And in so many different ways, the way they relate to you is that is that of an American, that you're an American now, you're not a Nigerian anymore. I do beg to differ, on a lot of, points that are raised on that subject, because let's take a project, for example. I've managed a number of projects, under different auspices, right, under different umbrellas. And when you try to share those experiences with folks back home, they always tell you the same thing. You've been away for too long, you don't understand. So they're not open to trying to understand or apply, knowledge that you're very conscious of and knowledge that has worked for you. And some of the same knowledge that makes this country what it is, that makes everything work so smoothly, that makes it possible for us to plan and execute. They dismiss all of that, And again, I don't get too upset, because if one doesn't know, they just don't know, So even when I visit, Nigeria now, it's fun. I'm excited. In the first week, it's like, oh my God, this is wonderful. I want to go here. I want to meet this. I want to go see this. Okay, but then after about a week, I start to miss my family. I start to miss my friends. And I want to come back home. And the first time I actually said this to my mom, she looked at me like I done lost my mind. I was in Nigeria for about 10 days, and I think I started having what one might consider an anxiety attack. And it was really bad. And I remember calling and asking if my ticket can be amended so I can leave a little sooner than I was supposed to leave. That's when I realized that this is home. That is not home anymore. That's where I'm from. That's where I was born. That's where I kind of, develop my worldview. I carry that culture with me. But I cannot really consider it, my home, because my family is here more than, so.
How about your daughters? What do they feel about their Nigerian roots?
Yeah, that's always very interesting.
Are they interested? Do they seek that out?
Well, the thing about kids is they all develop their personalities, and being that they're all girls, that changes from time to time as well. So my middle daughter, she looks just like me, and some say she acts just like me. I think she's very, very ingrained in the African culture, and she's very connected to the earth, if I could put it that way. And she's the one who, for the longest time, maybe from a very early age, has my own eating habits. So she does not even eat meat. And nobody said anything about try to be healthy to her, and she just decided that that's what she wants to do. She has a special relationship with the universe, so she relates more to the Nigerian culture. My older daughter, I'm not quite sure where she is today, but I think she sees herself more so as an American, before she would consider herself as mixed or maybe Nigerian. So they each have their own approach, the way they see their own worldview. But I think there's a healthy appreciation for the African or Nigerian, nuances that I share with them or bring to the table, and they want to hear about them, they talk about them, but nobody has told me that they're so eager to move back to Africa yet. Maybe as they get older, they might do that, But I think they do see themselves as having a mixed heritage, and they appreciate that, they love that. But essentially, they do see themselves as Americans first.
Do they speak Yoruba or Otwa?
No, they don't. And that's because my wife is American. So it would kind of be rude to be speaking a language that, which is another interesting subject, because So among Nigerians, and one of the things we do a lot, if my Nigerian friends were to visit, I have to constantly remind them to speak in English. Because, you run into your friend who speaks Igbo, and having been away from Nigeria for so long, we just want to speak Igbo language, because there are things that we haven't had the opportunity to say in a while, right? So we just want to say one or two words in Igbo. But as someone who lives with, somebody who was born and raised in America, I know how an American feels when someone is speaking a foreign language they don't understand, and they're aware of the fact that you can speak English. So it was difficult for me to consciously maybe try to, interact with my daughters in that language when I know their mother couldn't speak it. You see, I wish I came up with a way to make sure that they learn that language early. But they can still travel to Nigeria and learn. There's family there, but they don't speak. I think they understand a few words here and there, but fluently, no, they don't.
I'm going to circle way back.
Okay.
And you told us a story before we started the interview about when you were young and you were forced to wear occasionally African garb, and that was uncomfortable for you. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
That was torture.
Yeah.
So
Where did that come from? Why was
well,
it like that?
so we were born. I was I'm not quite sure, but when we were young, I remember clearly that we've always been Christians, and we attended a Catholic church, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of the things that we did were in so many ways associated or akin to how people live their life in the Western societies. And I think it had to do with where we lived growing up and the people my father associated with. His friends were from different walks of life, some Nigerian, some foreign. When he left the Nigerian police force, I think he worked with, I don't know what arm of the government, but he was in contact with a lot of people, ship captains and pilots and stuff like that. So, and as somebody who read very, very, broadly, I think his view of how he wanted his family to be raised was a lot more Western. So that was what we were used to. And then suddenly, somebody had an epiphany and realized that, wait a minute, these kids will not know anything about their culture, just like my kids, right? And the decision was made to kind of try to acculturate us into our own culture, right? So we had to wear, native attires and start, the whole thing about, you can't speak English in this house anymore, you have to speak Otuo. And those were just disastrous. But looking back at those, it was fun, because I would literally cry on a Sunday because my parents made me wear traditional Yoruba or, Benin or Edo outfits. But as I grew older, I came to appreciate it. And in fact, now I would rather wear, the traditional outfits because in a way, it's like a billboard that informs and educates, without verbal interaction or communication. You see somebody on the street and they say, oh, I really like, this, right? And you might strike a conversation, and that conversation might lead to sharing an experience or sharing an aspect of that culture with that person, which I think makes us all better people, when you learn about each other. So.
As an artist and as a human being, if you want to put it that way, what inspires you?
Humanity, just people, their capacity for kindness and their capacity for good, and their capacity for things that are not so good as well. But as an artist, my job is not to pass judgment. my job is just to record. So, and I share this with my students sometimes, and I said, if you think about what you do as an artist and you think about the fact that your works, the works you create, would outlive you, they'll be here centuries after you're gone, you might want to think twice about what you put on a canvas. Because centuries after you're no longer here, people will judge you based on what you put on that canvas, So my work, for the most part, attempts to capture aspects of different cultures. It's an attempt to bridge or find the similarities in different cultures. For example, I studied extensively the Benin, or Edo-speaking people, and certain elements and nuances about our culture, and compare those to the Japanese culture. And what drew me into that area of study was the word Edo. Edo is the word that is the language the Benin people speak. So, and we're close, very close to the Benin Kingdom. So sometimes if somebody asks me, where are you from? I'll say, I'm Benin. Because it's the closest kingdom they might be able to relate to, from the mid-western part of the country. I'll say I'm Benin or I'm Edo, but I'm not Benin. I'm just close to, that. So, but the Edo language, the language the Benin speak is called Edo language. Now, we all know that there's a period in Japanese art that is called the Edo or Edo period. And so those two connections for me, sparked, some kind of light, and I started to look at, and just study visual imagery from both cultures. Mannerism, the physical structure, for example, Japanese, features like the eyes, the way the nose shaped and formed, and things like that, right? And as I continued this study, it was just quite revealing what I discovered. Among the Edo-speaking people of Benin, I noticed certain facial, elements or features. The eyelids that are very full, very, very full eyelids, which naturally makes the eyes look thinner, just like the Japanese. It's very common. My sister, I have two younger sisters, the older one, Mabel, she has all those Japanese features. Long nose, almost like very, very thin eyes, and she's light skinned, And when you look at the Japanese Noh theater, for example, Japanese prints, and a lot of things, I started to make this correlation, So a lot of my work as an artist is my attempt to find similar differences, among different cultures. So I don't know if that explains,
Just a couple more things.
Yes.
Most of us in this country know very little about Africa.
Yes, that's true.
And some people even think of Africa as if it were one country.
Mm-hmm.
And your biography, you grew up in a house with Shakespeare, and
Yes.
your father read you Tempest for a bedtime story. And so
Yes.
does the limitation of what we know about who you are and where you come from, does that ever bother you? Is that ever a problem for you?
No, it doesn't. In fact, I can remember where I heard about this. Somebody once said that the entire continental United States can fit into the Sahara Desert about 2.5 times. Just the Sahara Desert. And Africa and so many civilizations, in that continent have been here for centuries before a lot of European nations were conceived. And we believe in this notion of continuity. The religion and the way of life is based on this notion of continuity. So how can I be upset at a country or a people who are literally maybe 200 or 300 years old, right? Um, in the context of how they react or behave towards a culture that is maybe 3,000 years old. You should not be upset about that. You know, you should only play your limited part, you know, to make things better, to help people learn, to help people understand so they can appreciate, you know. But at the same time, I believe that, you know, younger people are supposed to learn from the wisdom of ages. Older people sometimes are also required and supposed to learn from kids because they do know some things, right? So when you look at it from that point of view, it doesn't bother me as much. And as an educator, it just tells me that I have more work to do. And when I have the opportunity to introduce a little bit of, you know, information about Africa, then I take advantage of that. But for people who do not take time to understand before they articulate, I think that it helps. I think that you might even feel better if you just take a moment and say, okay, let me just read up a little bit, right? In Edo, the former Edo states, you know, Nigeria is evolving and it's growing and it's getting better and better every day. So there are more states now than there were when I was in Nigeria. So I think I don't know if it's 40 states now, I can't remember. But the former Edo state, we believe that there are about 43 different, they call them dialects, but we want to call them languages in one state, in one country. So, I mean, it's so complex that for a Nigerian, the notion of diversity and inclusiveness has to be your number one priority, in my opinion. That one of the reasons why things can be difficult there, and you know, one of the reasons why it's difficult for others to even relate to us, you know, is that we might not have spent enough time, you know, helping people understand how well we have embraced our own diversity, you know. Yes.
Yeah, and the United States is a very young country, I should
It's
say. And
relatively.
we're still evolving.
Yes.
We're still finding our way. But we're struggling right now with diversity and inclusiveness. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you see the promise of this country from the perspective of a Nigerian immigrant of a complex background yourself?
So, my former provost, we were having a conversation about an incident, and you know, she was trying to console me, and then she said, "Don't worry, those are growing pains." You know, and I like some really unique American phrases, you know, because I try to compare them to similar phrases in Yoruba language or Oto language. She said, "Oh, those are growing pains." I think these are all growing pains. These are things we have to deal with, you know, so that we can be in a better place in the future. It is, however, sometimes shocking, and it is sometimes disturbing to experience some of the things we have experienced here in this country, and some of the things we're experiencing kind of right now. But we have to be optimistic. We have to be optimistic and know that, you know, young people, I'm always very proud of, you know, a lot of our young people. The things they have to deal with and the things they're required to learn in 5th grade now, I think 20, 30 years ago, you had to be in college to learn some of those things, you know. So I'm proud and I'm confident in the fact that they have the knowledge and the know-how to navigate this complexity that we're dealing with right now. This has unveiled a lot of things. I think it's because of the lack of cultural sensitivity. It has also opened other wounds, other movements, and things like that. But I think, again, these are things we can learn from. I'm surely, learning, every day. What I knew or did or didn't do 10 years ago, I've learned from all of those experiences, and I've grown as a person. So I do have to believe that others can do the same thing, But it is difficult. But it's important also for all of us here in the United States to take a moment to study our history and other people's history. It's very, very important because it's a very effective way to avoid, a lot of trouble. You learn, they say, those who do not learn from their history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. In the 80s, for whatever reason, the Nigerian government, under this same president we have right now, decided that all undocumented foreigners would have to leave the country. It was a military administration. It was not voted into power. It took power by force, and it said that every undocumented person has to leave the country. Hundreds of people perished trying to leave before the deadline. Hundreds of other individuals were empowered to take advantage of the immigrants who were being asked to leave the country. People were treated unfairly. Some people were bullied. Some people probably were killed as a result of that policy. I believe that because all these people were forced to leave the country, the economy of Nigeria took a nosedive, and it has not recovered since. So for those who might think that the solution to immigration or the solution to their own economic prosperity lies in sending everybody across the border, I say think again. I say get a book and read a book. And so you can learn what these kind of experiences may result to. There are a lot of jobs today that are done by immigrants. And if they vacate those positions, a lot of us may not want to fill those positions, right? So that's something to think about. And those positions are things that makes our life a lot easier in so many different ways. I think to paint an issue with such a broad stroke is not the smart way to go. I think the former president said it so well when he said that some problems require a scalpel so you can dissect them with precision, and some problems you have to get a hatchet. This is a scalpel issue, not a hatchet issue, I think.
That's a great place
Yeah.
to end it, unless there's something else that you would like to talk about that we haven't touched on. Imagine a fifth grader who's found your interview on YouTube
Yes.
and wants to know about this person or about what it was like to immigrate from Nigeria. Is there anything else you would want her to know?
That the world of tomorrow, is a world where our origin, ethnicity will not matter. In fact, right now, some believe that it is prudent to have a foot on at least more than one continent. I thought one of the things I could do for my daughters is to provide a home for them here in the United States and also provide a home for them in Nigeria, or maybe other parts of the world. So we are slowly moving towards that future where there will be no physical, borders or boundaries, and it's already happening now in so many different ways. In the educational sector, it's prudent to maybe take 80% of your courses in one institution and maybe try one from another institution in China online, right? Study abroad is one of the things that I push in our program, because I know when I send our students abroad, when they get back to the United States, they become a lot more appreciative of everything the government, the community, their parents have to offer. When they take that first cold shower and they say, well, I need hot water, and somebody goes like, you need what? You want to make tea? I think it changes everybody once you venture out of your community, the borders of your country, and you meet other people. They're not bad people, and I dare to say that they're not smarter than you. They're not. We have this notion that some people from certain parts of the world are just so smart, so when they come here, they become smart and they take all our good jobs. No, they're not smarter than you. Necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity has forced some of these people to say, hey, I don't have a tablet, but I do have my math textbook, so I'm just going to read this textbook, right? So when we go out of our country, we learn how other people live. And it's one of the experiences that I always recommend, and it makes you not only a better person, but it makes you a richer person. Your worldview, the way you experience things changes. So I would encourage that fifth grader to make sure they start to kind of speak with their parents about the need to do a study abroad or to do an exchange program. You don't have to go pay a lot of money in a hotel. Live with a family. Live how they live. I would like to leave that fifth grader with one thought. I'm not a super religious person, and I have taken time really to study world religion. I thought studying world religion in college was a very good way to begin to understand the problems of the world. So Hinduism and Buddhism, a lot of the Eastern religion, right? I once asked somebody, so why do they, when they greet you, they put their hands together and they bow to you, because in Nigeria, among the Yorubas, it's even more serious. Like when you meet an elderly person and you greet them, you're supposed to prostrate on the floor. And these are people who are known for their elaborate costumes and dresses and jewelry. Is a part of the culture. And then when you see somebody who is, their parents, an uncle, a mentor, you lie on the ground. For men, for women, you get on your knees, right? Why do they do this? And somebody explained it to me this way. When you meet a person, if you believe that person was created by God, then there is a little bit of God in that person. So if you can acknowledge that little bit of God in each person, every time you interact with them, you will not necessarily be thinking about harming or hurting that person or cheating that person in a business deal. I think the smartest thing that has happened to corporations in the last 50 years is when they came to their senses and learned that when I am sitting on a conference table across from another, chairman of a corporation, and we're trying to negotiate a merger or some kind of partnership, my goal and objective should not always be to leave that table with the most deals and leave that conversation or that negotiation with the upper hand. But if I'm able to achieve some of my objectives, I need to make sure that you can achieve yours as well. I need to bend to make sure you can achieve yours. Because if you do, and I achieve some of my objective, our relationship is better. If we negotiate this deal and you win everything, it's okay. It will not last for long, because my main preoccupation would then be how to get it back from you, or how to make sure that you do not enjoy the fruits of that labor. So we're now in a place, and I think young people understand this better than a lot of us. We're now in a place where, as young students here, they're smart. They know how to raise money. A lot of these young people can make their first $1 million before they turn 21. What is really cool about these young people is they are so inclined to also give away that $1 million. And if the world does not understand that we're living in such a unique time, just because of that we have young people who are willing to go out, immerse this wealth, and they will do it effortlessly. They will design an app that does God knows what, takes a selfie for you, and they will sell that app, and everybody pays 99 cents, and 2 million people will download that app, and they are literally millionaires. But they will give that money away to a cause they believe in. If the world does not understand that we're living in a golden age, we will never understand anything else. So that's where I think I would like to leave it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow, amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is fun.
I want to take one of your classes.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
really,
Classes are fun, and that's why I'm really looking forward to the NASA accreditation that we're doing. It's a unique opportunity to standardize our program and kind of make things work better. And I think once that is done, I'm thinking about doing a little bit of something else. I do miss being in the classroom. I enjoy having interaction with the graduate students. So maybe what I'll do is just focus on the graduate program. I love teaching. And I never thought I would go into teaching. I just like, okay. Not only that, I learned how to